All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Colorful Cooking at Home. This January, we really wanted to bring you quite a few ideas, especially if you're trying to start off 2024 on the right track with your nutrition. So, just to introduce myself to you, my name is Kerri Stewart. I'm a registered dietitian in the Heart Resource Center over at Spartanburg Regional. In the back, I have Alexandra joining me. So, if you have any questions throughout this cooking demonstration, please feel free to type them in the chat and we will answer them. We are starting the morning off with a chickpea noodle soup. If you are like me and my family this winter, you've been struggling to stay well, and this is a tried and true recipe with really simple ingredients. It makes us feel better every time. It's so warm, it's so comforting. My toddler eats it. Everyone in the family likes it, and I hope you will too. So there are a couple different twists on this that we can do, but I'll talk about a lot of those while the soup is actually cooking. So we'll have a little bit of downtime then. So first things first, my hair is tied back and out of the way so I don't get it in anyone's food, and I'm going to wash my hands second. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right. Always an important first step there. So the second thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to preheat my pot over here because it's going to take a while to heat up. And I'm going to put it on medium, high heat, give or take, probably a little bit warmer, again, just because this one takes a while. And I'm going to start by chopping my vegetables. So we've got carrots and celery, as well as an onion that I'm going to start with. And so I'm going to do my onion last because I don't want to have the onion juice that gets all over my cutting board, all over my knife, travels up to my eyes, makes me start to cry. So I think I'm going to start with the celery here first. And I'm just going to cut these ends off here. One thing that I'm never very good at, but I try to do more, is if you can cut more than one thing at a time, you're actually being more efficient that way. I'm going to put these pieces to the side here, and that is a great way to save. These are all great things to save for homemade broth. Now I'm going to slice long ways down my celery, and this is one of those things where I've noticed I might keep it, these aren't too large, so I'm going to keep cutting these in half, but this is one of the things that I've noticed that if I cut them a lot smaller, my toddler daughter is more likely to eat them. So we're certainly going through a phase right now where she's not super into veggies, but there are ways that I've found that, not that I'm trying to sneak them in. So I believe in full transparency. If she asks me if it's a vegetable, then I tell her, yes, it is. But we try and talk about how when we cook them differently, they can taste different. So I think I will just try and cut everything a little bit smaller here. I'm being very careful to keep my fingers out of the way. All right. And then I'm going to line up these 4 at one time. And this is also going to help our veggies cook faster. Now I'm rocking my fingers back and forth. You can see that the tip of my knife actually is never even coming off of the cutting board here. And these shapes don't have to be perfect, but I'm not doing much. Really, all I'm doing is rocking my wrist back and forth. And that's the beauty of a really sharp knife. So the knife does the work for you. You don't actually have to worry about sawing into anything, which that's where it can get a lot more dangerous. Now what I've done is I've turned my knife over so that I'm not scooping the sharp blade side into my hand. And that's going to do one of two things. First, it's not going to dull the knife because I'm not scraping the sharp part over my cutting board back and forth. And second, that's the sharp part. That's the dangerous part. So a lot of people then take that sharp part and they bring it right into their hand. And that's another way we risk getting cut. So I'm going to keep chopping this celery. And again, we're doing celery, carrots, and onion. That is a fancy way of saying that in the culinary world is that we are making a mirepoix. And that's all it means. It's just onions, celery, and carrots. But there's something really sweet naturally about this this soup, which I love. All right, there's more celery. And so we'll do that one more time here. This is a great way to use up celery that's looking a little sad too. You know, if you do, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take these celery stalks or sticks, maybe I should say, and I ribs. There we go. Alexandra suggested ribs. That's probably the better idea. We had a long conversation with that about that not too long ago. I feel like a stalk is the entire bunch of celery. All right, so that one didn't look so perfect, does it? Let me turn this around and go this way. But one of the things you can do, so a lot of times I will cut up all of my celery. I'll wash it all and I'll cut it all up at the same time. And I'll cut some into sticks so that I can eat those for, with some hummus or something like that if I want. And then, of course, if you're making soup or you're doing something else with it, it's already washed, and then you can just take it and cut it into smaller pieces if you need. But put it in you could do a cup, you could do a larger Tupperware, you could do anything like that. And put a little water in the bottom. The same goes for your carrots. That will actually help keep them all hydrated. And then, Alexandra can already smell my celery. I love that. Okay, so I'm just going to, again, cut the tops and the bottoms off of the carrots now. I guess I didn't quite finish my celery talk, but again, that way we're minimizing the time that we're in the kitchen. So yeah, it might take us a little bit longer there at the beginning, but we've basically kind of meal prepped in and of itself. And if you have, like a chickpea salad, or you've got something else that needs celery, then you've already gotten your celery washed and you're less likely to waste it. But if it does get wilty, this soup is a great way to just cut it up. You're just going to put it in your pot and cook it anyway. So don't let it go to waste. Either that, or again, you can put it in your Ziploc bag over here, and you can save it for broth, which I'll talk about in a minute. All right, so I'm going to start with my carrots. As you can probably see, we have not peeled them. Peeling is more work. So if you want to do that, have more work, go ahead. Again, I'm going to cut these pretty small. So I just cut my carrot in half first, long ways. And I've got my fingers curled up over here, away from my blade. And so we've got little quarter circles there that I'm just doing for this. But again, this is going to boil. So we're actually going to get a little bit of extra fiber by keeping the peel on, although I have to say that it is a little bit bitter. So if you remove the peel from your carrot, I don't think it makes too much of a difference in this case, but if I were to take these whole carrots and eat carrot sticks raw, then I would go ahead and peel them because, like I said, it can be a little bit bitter. We did wash these carrots off first, so we took a nice little brush, scrubbed in here, kind of gets into all these little nooks and crannies, since some carrots can be kind of funny shaped. So this one, let's do this one. So I'm actually going to cut it here where this little twist kind of starts to turn, because it wouldn't have been safe for me to cut long ways with the carrot that way. And what I'm doing is I'm putting the bottom of my knife into the carrot, into the back, and we're creating a flat surface. So that way it doesn't roll around on me when I'm trying to cut, because of course that makes it unsafe that way. And now we've got all these nice little flat surfaces, so it's not going to roll. I'm digging my knife in so that it's stable, and then taking the top of my hand, pressing down on the top. So we've got our carrots here. I can feel the warmth of my pot starting to heat up. All right. And you could do the same thing with your carrots. So you could go ahead and peel them if you wanted. You could cut them into sticks like this and leave them like that. You could combine them with your celery, and then you'll have celery and carrot sticks. And both of them do very well all week long if you put them in a little container with just a little bit of water. You don't want to fully submerge them, but just a little bit of water really helps keep them hydrated instead of drying out. And so the flavor is great all week long. Quick grab and go snack that way. So we've got our carrots to thank for some of the immune properties of this soup. One thing about orange is that the orange foods provide a lot of immune boosting properties. So vitamin A is actually really helpful for immune function. I know a lot of times we say, oh, carrots are good for your eyes. And yeah, the vitamin A is great for your eyes, but the beta carotene and some of the other carotenoids, they're called. So those are the phytonutrients, the plant-based compounds that are that orange or reddish color that we find heavily in carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, mangoes, peaches, cantaloupe. Yep, sweet potatoes. Those are butternut squash. That's another one. So those are actually going to literally help the body's immune system by helping to build some of those immune cells that are able to then go and attack the viruses and be able to spot certain cells that cause cancer. It's also great for endocrine function. So if any of our friends out there are managing either diabetes or all sorts of any type of hormonal, I mean, there's all kinds of hormones we got going on that are related to our endocrine system. So orange foods can really help those organs function better, especially with our ladies. We see reductions in breast cancer, and we see reductions in uterine and ovarian types of cancer with a lot of orange foods. So they seem to target our ladies' reproductive organ systems and decrease the inflammation there, which can decrease all those other things. So that brings me to, these are a little bit smaller, so I'm only gonna cut some of them. Let's see if we can do all these at once. And then we'll be done our carrots. And I'm gonna go ahead and start to add these two before I cut the onion. That way I can just dump the onion right on in. All right, so I've got my bowl of my onions and, oh, I'm sorry, my carrots and my celery. I've got my pot over here that's preheating. So it's hot already. I'm going to turn that down a little bit and maybe even take it off the heat for a second. Okay, now I've got just a tablespoon of olive oil. So nothing crazy, not a ton. We don't need a lot, just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and add my celery and my carrots, get those going. Stir it up really well to kind of coat them in the oil. And the interesting things about, there we go, about the oil is that there are some folks that choose not to eat any oil. You absolutely can do that. Otherwise, this recipe is not going to have any fat in it. And so our, let me need my bowl back. A lot of our phytonutrients are actually fat soluble. So we need a little bit of fat to actually help them be absorbed into the body so that they can do what they're supposed to do. So by adding just a touch of olive oil that way, we are going to make sure that we're able to absorb all of those good nutrients. That is part of the reason we're eating all of these to begin with. So it's not much. It's not going to be much in the way of calories or anything like that. All right, so now we've got our onion. The onion is forever something that I tell people there is not a right way to do it. There's just a safe way. So we're peeling these flaky outer layers off of it first. I know that I do not cut onions like a professional chef would, but it's what works for me. And it's what I can do faster now because I've been practicing it. So that's a lot of it, right? Because the more you do some of this stuff, the easier it gets. I'm just going to try and keep stirring this around now. All right. So I've got my bowl back here. I've got my onions cut in half. And the thing about onions is that the faster you do them and get them out of there, the less likely they are to make you cry. So when onions make us cry, what's happening is we are getting these sulfur compounds that are airborne. We cut into that onion, we release all those cells, and the onion and those sulfur compounds start to travel upward to our eyes. I've heard all sorts of tricks. So I've heard that if you keep your onion cold before you do this, that it's less likely to bother your eyes. I've heard if you wear glasses, that can be helpful because, again, you're kind of protecting your eyes in a way there. All right, there we go. So now I've got my onion. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rinse off my cutting board so that I'm removing those juices that could still be causing me to tear up. But I did pretty well. I feel good. All right, so now we're going to add our onion to our bowl. Whoops, I'm throwing food around. What's new? Okay, give this a good stir to coat my onion a little bit. All right, and then while this is sauteing, we've got two more veggies we're going to chop up. We've got our zucchini and we've got our garlic cloves. But like I said, I'm going to actually, now that it's cooking more, that's when now it's starting to get to me. I think I'm going to rinse out my bowl too. So, whew. All right, we've got our bowl again. Now I'm going to set my knife to the side and I'm going to rinse off my cutting board here. All right. Hopefully that'll save me. Okay. And one of the things maybe you can't see is that I'm actually using a towel underneath my cutting board because it doesn't have grips. So because it doesn't have any grips, This is actually helping to keep my cutting board stable so it's not sliding all across my counter while I'm trying to cut. All right, now we've got zucchini and we've got garlic. So, okay. I'm gonna go ahead and do my zucchini. Again, these tops and bottoms here are great for broth. I am going to cut my zucchini in half. This is something. Oh, that wasn't very even. I can leave the zucchini in slightly larger pieces just because it's softer. It's not going to cook. It's not going to need as long to cook either. So again, so I cut it in half to keep it stable, give it a flat surface, and then I'm just rocking my knife back and forth. I've got my pointer finger kind of along this flat edge of this knife there. And then I've got my thumb gripped on the other side, so I have a nice tight grip on it. And then I'm just letting my wrist do the work. All right, we've got our zucchini. One of the things that I actually learned from having some other folks do these classes with me is the efficiency of cutting it long ways. I don't know why, but for years, cucumber and zucchini, I would cut it into little circles and then cut it in half. And that is so inefficient and it takes a really long time. And it never dawned on me to cut it down lengthwise first and then use that motion. So you never know. There are things that we can be learning in the kitchen forever to make it easier and faster, because that is usually the two things. It's not that people don't want to enjoy a home cooked meal, but it's just that it simply takes longer. So how can we save a little time and energy, make it easier? One of the other things that makes it a lot easier is a scrap bowl. So as you see, I'm not running back and forth to the trash can either. I've got a little scrap bowl there. Yes, it's one more dish, but it's just a bowl. And then I've got my other little bowl that I'm putting my chopped veggies in to separate. We've measured out everything. We've gotten out all of our ingredients that we need. This is something that I'm really good at doing when we do these videos and not as good at doing when I'm at home, but I'm getting a lot better because I've realized it is crucial to make this process easier for you. All right, now we've got our zucchini, so I'm going to go ahead and pour that in and give it a stir. Woo! Flinging carrots. All right. And then I'm going to add my garlic and we'll add our spices in there with it. So we're doing 2 cloves of garlic. I'm going to take my clove and I'm going to put the, whoops, there was a zucchini hiding. I'm going to put the palm of my hand, almost where my wrist is, where I've got a lot of stability. I'm going to lay into this garlic clove. Sometimes you see people put the knife down and they slap their hand really fast. We don't need to do that. That's not really the safest way. You can just put it and lean into it, and that'll do the trick as well. But if you get good at it and you want to get a little fancier, impress some house guests, perhaps then you can do it. But otherwise, that removes the paper just like that. So I'm going to bunch up my garlic, and I've got my little claw over here, my crab feet, so that I'm keeping my fingers out of the way of this. And I'm making really thin lines with my garlic. There we go. And then I'm just going to angle them toward me so I can have them almost in a line. And again, just rock back and forth really slowly. but cut it up into super tiny pieces. I'm a garlic lover, so I don't mind having a bunch of garlic or larger chunks, especially in this where we're kind of boiling it. It's not really going to be too strong, but not everyone loves that. So I'm just going to scrape these little chunks off of my fingers. I'm going to scoop it back into a pile and rock back and forth again. Boop, 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 boop. And you can do this as many times as you want until it's as small as you like it. There we go. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and slide my garlic this time right into the pot because it's lovely and sticky. Boop. I think I've become immune to garlic. I think I could probably eat 4 cloves in this and be very happy or not even realize it's in there. All right. There we go. Now I'm going to just rinse my hands off here for a second because it is sticky. Boop. Okay. Great. So now we've got a teaspoon of salt. We're going to shake in here. A teaspoon of dried thyme. That's really kind of the only ingredient that maybe kind of special ingredient you might want. And this is a half of a teaspoon of ground black pepper. Give all that a stir. The thyme already smells so good. Oh my gosh. Thyme really adds a lot of flavor. It goes awesome with carrots. So one of my favorite recipes besides using thyme here is just a simple thyme roasted carrot. So roasting your carrots in the oven, maybe a little salt, a little pepper, covering it with a little bit of thyme. And it really goes quite lovely together with the sweetness of the carrots kind of coming out by roasting. Oh my goodness, that smells so good. And really, it was just very simple ingredients. All right. So we're gonna let all of this keep cooking for a minute, and then I'm gonna add 8 quarts of broth. This is unsalted vegetable broth, so that is why we put a full teaspoon of salt into this recipe. One of the things about this is that it also does really well with the bouillon pastes. So some of those are almost like concentrated veggies. So there's more flavor. There's a more of a savory flavor that you might get. So they will be in the little containers that are located somewhere near the broth. It's usually way up high. It's usually way down low. Yes, it's one extra step in preparing the broth, but in this case, it's great because you need 8 cups of it. And by the time you buy these, you almost are going to pay as much for the jar and be able to make quarts and quarts of broth with just that little jar. So if you did use that, then I wouldn't add any salt at all because those tend to be plenty high in sodium. But again, because we are using specifically unsalted broth, that's why I'm doing that there. Then we're going to use chickpea noodles, and we're going to use great white northern beans for this instead. Partly because this is what I had, but this is my twist on chickpea noodle soup. So not quite what you thought, right? But you could actually use the chickpeas in the can, absolutely. And then you could use either your whole wheat pasta, does great in there. Ideally, that would be what you choose over just the white pasta because it's got so much more fiber and protein in it. And this will have quite a bit of fiber and protein with both the chickpea pasta and the white beans that way. So if you're concerned about protein intake, this is a good way to do that. All right. So really, I was just giving this a little more time to cook, like 2 or 3 minutes with some of these spices in here. And then I'm going to make sure, I think we add our broth next. And once we do that, then there'll be plenty of time for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat now. Yep. All right. So I'm going to shake these up a little bit. And right, we're gonna do the broth. And I'm gonna crank this up because we want this to be boiling before we add our noodles, actually. Okay, there's one. And two. I really do like the flavor of this broth. Some of the veggie broths I don't particularly care for as much as others. And those can be good for making grains, especially if you're making brown rice or quinoa. Try making it with broth. A lot of times that can actually give it a lot more flavor. Right. So again, now it's going to take a little while. So we're going to talk about the pasta first, and I'm going to keep an eye on when our pot starts to bubble. So chickpea noodle pasta. It's made of chickpeas, pea starch, tapioca, and xanthan gum. So basically a couple binders. That chickpea flour by itself is probably just a little bit too high in, protein and the fiber that it needs a little bit of these binders to kind of hold the noodle shape together. There is a little bit of sodium, but again, we just read the ingredient list. It wasn't added to it, so all of this is natural. This is an 8-ounce box, which is nice because all we need is 8 ounces of noodles. So if you were to do some regular noodles, then just know that all you're using is a half of a box. So this is going to be a little bit more pricey, but again, it's going to have some extra nutrition that you wouldn't otherwise be getting. But feel free, we make it all the time with whole wheat noodles, and it's great. So the whole wheat noodles, you may just want to boil a little bit longer. This says 7 to 9 minutes. So that's something that I'm going to keep my eyes peeled on is normally if you're just boiling this in straight water, then you wouldn't quite need as long as traditional pasta. So this recipe, I'm supposed to boil it for 15 minutes, which is a little bit longer for any type of pasta, but I'll probably give it a check in maybe 10 minutes and just see how the noodles actually are before, because we don't want to overcook the chickpea noodles. That can make them kind of gummy, but otherwise they do really well in this recipe. So this will also feed about 6 people. So if you are watching your sodium, then just know that you will still very well be underneath that 600 to 700 milligrams a meal, because again, it's so many servings. So if you have a large family, it's really nice in that way. And you're going to get a lot of flavor out of it, but still manage to be within normal or reasonable sodium limits for a whole meal. And that's great because it's good for everybody's heart, but also a lot of extra potassium going on with our chickpea noodles and our beans. So we've got that there. I'm going to check, I'm going to stir up my pasta here. Or I'm sorry, my soup. Not pasta. No pasta yet, but I've got pasta on the brain. Do we have any questions right now? All right. We will keep on keeping on. All right. So the only other thing that we'll do is we'll plate it all, and then we'll top it with a little bit of fresh parsley here. And what I can do is I can also show everyone the label of our pasta and maybe what it looks like. How about that? Okay. So Sandra will help me direct my hand. Okay. So here is I chose these little curly shapes because they're fun, but they have a couple different shapes in this variety of chickpea pasta. But you can see, I mean, it looks pretty much like regular noodles. So there's that. And let's see how well we can do the ingredient list. Down, forward, up. How's that? So it may be a little bit hard to see, but again, look at how much protein, how much fiber is in there. There's all sorts of vitamins and vitamins and minerals, excuse me, that are on here as well. So you're really getting so much. And especially, I've been talking to a lot of folks about skipping breakfast. And that's the interesting thing, is that when we skip a meal like that, we're actually missing the opportunity to get in all of these nutrients. But it could be possible to kind of make that back up if you're eating a really nutrient dense meal like this would be. So what we mean by that is there are a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals, a lot of fiber, a decent amount of protein, etc. in just this one dish. So this is going to do that for you. We've got over 500 milligrams of potassium in 2 ounces of the pasta. So that would be like dividing this box by 4. 5 grams of fiber just in that. Then we're using our white beans, and there's 6 grams of fiber in a half a cup of the white beans. Then we've got all the veggies in there, so they're going to contribute to fiber. And with our fiber, we're really looking for around 30 to 40 grams per day. Fiber is going to do a lot of different things for us. It's going to help lower our LDL cholesterol. So it'll actually bind to the cholesterol and remove it from our bodies. It helps keep us full longer. It helps better manage our insulin and our blood sugar because it prevents our sugar from spiking so high after meals, which we all want, even if we do or don't have diabetes. And then because that also helps prevent that afternoon slump. So this meal isn't going to make you feel bad if you come and bring it for lunch, you reheat it. You're going to feel possibly more energized and better than you would if you brought, went through the drive-through and got something full of lots of fat and lots of starches. There's those simple carbohydrates. Fiber is also going to help prevent certain types of cancer, so namely colon and rectal cancer, but we're finding reductions in breast and prostate cancer with enough fiber as well. And then it is food for our gut bacteria, actually. So some of what they love to eat the most is fiber, and the other things that they like to eat a lot of are some of these phytonutrients. So they then in turn can take the fiber, they turn it into fuel for our colon cells, which helps keep them nice and plump and happy, which also helps us go to the bathroom and keep us regular in that way. So that's another good thing about fiber. So we really want enough, 30 to 40 grams a day in that way. All right, I see my pot starting to not quite bubbling yet, but it's getting there. Let me see. Getting close. Okay. So I think for the sake of time, we will actually go ahead and put in our noodles and our beans. And now that we know everything we could possibly want to know about some of these bean-based, I do think chickpea, there are all sorts of different types of noodles out there that are made from beans. I saw black bean not too long ago, which obviously the noodle is black, so it's got a very striking color, but this is colorful cooking at home. So don't forget that even black can be a color of the rainbow that has lots of different phytonutrients in it. Then there is red lentil I've seen as well. I've liked the red lentil before pretty well. There's soybean pasta. They're all going to have a little bit of, different textures. So before you go trying it in another recipe, you may want to follow the exact directions on the box and just see how you like it that way. So that could be a good option. All right, we're getting a little bit bubbly, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour my noodles in. And I hear it coming. And then again, I'm using Great Northern white beans, really just because that's what we had. So give everything a nice big stir. We really did quite well in terms of our color. All right, I'm going to put my lid on here now. That's kind of another unique thing about this recipe is if you're just cooking pasta, you wouldn't normally put the lid on, but with this one you do. And I'm going to set a little timer over here for 10 minutes just because I could possibly get to chatting and forget to check on our pasta. So, and I'm also going to grab a fork because I want my pasta to be fork tender. That would be one of the things you want to check in this for doneness. That and maybe the carrot, because sometimes the carrots, especially with the peel, might take a little bit longer. But again, you're saving time by not peeling it that way, so I like that too. Let me grab a fork, and I'll have that ready and waiting. And then otherwise, clean up my station a little bit, and I'm going to just tear off a little bit of parsley. The parsley adds just kind of a nice herbal pop of flavor to this too. One of the ways that you can tell if your parsley is good is by pinching it with your finger, giving it a smell, and then you should be able to smell it. It should smell nice and robust and delicious. If you can't smell it, then you can't taste it. So you've lost a lot of the nutrients and those phytonutrients, those heart healthy chemicals that are good for you to begin with. So if you can't taste it and it's not going to do anything good for you, we don't really want that one. So you could also do dried. You could top this with all sorts of stuff. I believe I dropped some parsley down my shirt. That's what it feels like. All right, we've got a question and I would love to answer it. Could you use zoodles instead of pasta? That is a really great question. So you've got the zucchini already in here. So you just have to do the recipe a bit differently, I guess. What you probably could do is put the beans in. Let me think about this. So you'd still probably want to cook your zoodles with the rest of your, maybe saute them a little bit again to kind of bring out those natural sugars. But then you wouldn't really need to boil this because the whole reason you're boiling it is, I mean, these are already pre-cooked beans. And the whole reason you're boiling it is for the pasta. So that actually might save you quite a bit of time as well. It just may not be as filling, but maybe you could double the beans as well. And you may not need quite as much broth because it's the noodles are going to absorb the broth. So maybe start with, instead of 8 cups, maybe start with 6 and see how it goes in that way. And then, so I would saute everything, including your zoodles, then maybe bring it to a boil and add your beans and just simmer, like bring it right back down so that there's a light bubble, and do maybe 5 minutes just to give those beans a little time to actually really warm up. And the beans are going to soak up some of the broth and some of the flavors too. But I don't see why you couldn't do that. Absolutely. That's a great idea. I bet you could even do like butternut squash noodles. They have those out there now too. So that'll add a little bit of starch, but and maybe just a little, I mean, it's still going to be a sweet, awesome flavor that would go along well with all of this, but the butternut squash noodles aren't going to take nearly as long to cook as if you cubed up the butternut squash. So that's why I wouldn't. Same thing with like sweet potatoes. I wouldn't necessarily add those to this because the point is that it's actually a very quick soup. So I'm drawing it out by making it take an hour long, but that's a great question. Hmm. Yeah, and I haven't used this one in a while personally. So Alexandra and I were actually talking about the consistency of some of these and just what we've seen. This brand in particular has been around for a little while now. So I really feel, and they've come out with a variety of products. So this is my favorite alternative. And I find that it does well, especially when you're eating it fresh. But in some cases with the bean pastas and things like that, they don't do as well when you're reheating them in the microwave the next day. Or sometimes it's like just that extra 30 seconds of cooking might make it too gummy because they are so much more full of fiber, especially the soluble fiber, which is that kind of gel-like substance. So this is chickpea I have the best luck with out of all of them. And then, like I said, not to be brand specific, but some of them do better than others. So red lentil I've enjoyed, again, fresh, but did not reheat well in the microwave. So that's a great point though. All right, I'm going to turn this down a little bit because I've got my lid of my pasta, or my pot that is, talking to me. A little bit out here. Give it a stir. And I can see already my noodles have about doubled in size. Any other questions? That was a great question. Thank you for that. All right. So the question was time, fresh versus dried. Why choose one or the other? Um, dried time is affordable and easy. So, usually, unless you're growing it, then it's basically free to you, right? And time really does well here. So if you like it, you may want to consider growing it this summer or spring. So otherwise, a lot of times the fresh thyme that you see at the store is in those little packets, and it might be at least $2 for that little fresh bit of it versus $2 for a whole container of dried thyme. Dried thyme would do really, or I'm sorry, fresh thyme would do really well in this recipe also. And we just have to change the amounts. So this is a teaspoon of dried thyme, which is kind of a lot. So that means you're probably looking at least a tablespoon or so of the fresh thyme. And so it's so small. The leaves are so small on that stalk. So you kind of strip it and then it's like, okay, do we need two little little pieces of, or two boxes of the fresh thyme if you don't have easy access to it. So cost is one thing that I would consider, but otherwise the flavor of it should do really well. It is small and it's a bit more fragile. So in this case, because we're boiling, what I like about the dried is that it's going to you can immediately start to smell the dried when you start sauteing all of that. So it's going to immediately start to release some of those scents, those oils that are beneficial for us, and the flavor is going to continue to soak in, versus if we boil it or we did that with the fresh thyme, we might lose that flavor. And something like rosemary is a little bit sturdier. It can hold up better if you boil it like that. But it's always worth a try, right? Everything is worth a try. So kind of just depends on your personal situation and what you got at home. But we do want to incorporate more herbs. So that's the main thing, is trying some of these in recipes that may not even call for it. So if you have a recipe that you really love and you're like, you know what? Maybe I could see how this tastes if I just add a little bit of this or a little bit of that. I find myself adding double or triple the amounts of oregano, basil, some of those herbs to a lot of what I do, because sometimes I just feel like it needs more flavor. It doesn't quite have enough. So you can always add more, but you can't take it away either. So that's one thing that we want to be careful of. But these are leafy greens. And leafy greens are incredibly beneficial for heart health. A lot of times we don't think of eating thyme or oregano or parsley or basil or cilantro in the quantities that we would eat, say, a salad like spinach or kale or something like that. But in a lot of cases, especially the cilantro and the basil, they have very high amounts of natural nitric oxide, which is a vessel opener. So if we can incorporate little bits of this to anything that we're eating, it's just going to help dilate and relax our blood vessels, which then over time can also help to start to chip away at the plaque buildup in our arteries, as long as we're not continuing to put too much of those plaque buildup causing foods into our system. So saturated fat is a big culprit of that. So in terms of American Heart Association, we're looking at no more than 14 grams of saturated fat or less per day. So look at that. I made it to talking 10 more minutes quite easily. Thank you for that question. So I am going to take my fork here and I'm going to test one of our noodles here. Like I said, I think that'll be the deciding factor. Oh, and it actually broke in half. Make sure when you do this, it's that you're being careful because it's so hot. I think it needs maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna plate out a bowl so that we can have a finished product. So in that case, these actually took less time, which is kind of good. Got my ladle here. We've got all sorts of color. I love it. So we managed to do, we don't have any red. Whoops, wrong bowl. Wrong bowl. Beautiful. All right. So we managed to do orange with our carrots. We've got green with our zucchini, our parsley, our thyme. We've got white with our beans, our chickpea pasta, our onions, our garlic. And I'm going to move this so that you can see how beautiful. All right. Any more questions for us? All right. Ta-da! Alexandra said it smells good, and it does. She's right. So you can see, and like I said, this is just a really cozy recipe that pretty much, I mean, everyone in my family likes. It's a great recipe if someone is sick, they're not feeling so good. And again, you can see I kind of took my time, but you could also buy those pre-chopped vegetables if you wanted to do that. That would save you a lot of time. I have a little hand chopper that I use at home to chop up all my veggies, and then you're really done in no time. It's wonderful. If you give it a try, let us know. And I think the main thing is that I really do like it the best using some of those bouillon pastes instead of just the boxes of broth. And again, it's so much more affordable. So check for some of those next time you're at the store. But I'm going to turn this off because those noodles are good. And they taste like the texture right now is kind of between whole wheat and white. So it's not quite as fluffy as white, even though these now, maybe since I just cooked this batch a little bit longer, maybe it'll be good. But otherwise, especially if you have folks in your family that don't love whole wheat pasta, this could have more protein and more fiber potentially. So give it a try.